Number one actually is more just of an FYI. I just wanted to point, I saw that you asked Tim in a story when we were going to ship something. And there's
Oh,
a way
right.
for us to know it's like if it's been estimated, we're expecting it to go into the next sprint. If it
Hmm.
hasn't been estimated, it will go into the following sprint.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
Also depends on our bug backlog. Like,
Yeah.
like we didn't get all our stories in this sprint.
There's that for sure. There's that nuance too. But I think more as like a really general rule of
Hmm.
thumb, like when we're targeting, because the rest of the organization, that's how they look at it too.
Hmm.
And then ultimately we give them an update, but from like even outside product and engineering perspective, that's like the way
Okay.
everybody's reading the board. Yeah.
Okay. So then going back to the tickets we're addressing. So this is continuing the conversation about surfacing and addressing automatic policy failures. We had a discussion yesterday about this. Um, so the activity feed here doesn't really change. Clicking on show details opens up our modal, and I've added some copy here. So I didn't know if we still wanted to do this, but I added the timestamp.
Oh yeah, yeah. The styling looks a little bit, I see what you're doing. You're borrowing the styling there.
Hmm.
I haven't seen us do that kind of styling outside of the activity item itself.
Hmm.
I'm trying to, it looks, you know what I mean? It looks a little bit weird. Maybe because there's no like, this isn't in its own, I don't know, you know what I mean? It's kind of like floating down here. Um, I've seen us do things in other places where it's like parentheses timestamp.
Hmm.
Um, that's my immediate reaction is like that thing feels a little bit off
Hmm.
in this context. And if you can't find a good, let me see if I can find an example in dog food right now. If I can't in 2 minutes, then I would just shoot um, Marco a question and help design.
The other thing that I've added is well, I added the longer text and I shortened it to like after, in this one, if it's the MDM one. So after you turning MDM on, try and reinstall the app, and then have a link to learn more to your document that you updated yesterday, Noah,
Oh, cool.
as far as like how to like reinstall the app so we don't put a ton of text here. And then here I have it for
And
quick.
where does that link go?
Goes
Let's
to
see.
this. I think
Got it. Got it.
there might be an anchor link. Like it's not up yet.
Yeah, and this is the reason I ask is because I think um we want to do a redirect for both of these, meaning like instead of going directly
Oh,
to the URL, like we could bust up this anchor,
oh,
like we could mess that up later and then
oh,
we'd have a
okay,
broken link.
okay,
And like the redirect could be the pattern we use is like fleetdm.com/learn more about
right.
slash whatever phrase. And the
So speaking,
same goes for the ABM one too.
right. So this should be a redirect. Actually, I made the ABM redirect already,
Oh, nice.
which I think Eric already approved and I merged. So just FYI on that one.
Oh, cool, cool. Yeah, then you can just update the dev note to
Right.
whatever that redirect URL you added was.
Right. Okay, cool. So I'll make
Um, but let's see, digging into the copy, fleet failed to install, USMDM is turned off.
By the way, for the timestamp thing, I found an example of that. Noah IDM'd it to you so that
Oh,
um,
nice.
you can screen share or whatever.
Do you mind just popping it in the doc real quick? If you
Oh
still
yeah,
have
sure.
it.
Yeah.
And then yeah, then Eugene can reference it.
You
Cool. Thanks, Ian. Um, Try reinstalling the app. I think that makes sense. The word app, right? Like I'm just trying to think of like what do we call it elsewhere? We say app store app, we use software. Try installing. Try installing.
Software title.
Yeah, software title is another thing we use. Try reinstalling the software, I think. Because what the user is going to see, right, is this modal is going to be over the host details page.
Or, yep.
And there's a software tab. Yeah, I think software makes sense because they'll see the software tab is there.
Mhm.
We could go even further by like using the pattern where we say like software, like go to the software tab to reinstall the software, but I think
It wouldn't be
it's
in the
fine with
software
that.
tab anyway. It would be from the host. Um,
Oh,
and
sorry, the software tab on the host details page is
yeah,
what
Well,
I
I mean,
meant.
the learn more covers that, right? Because it covers both the individual host and the.
True. Yeah.
So like originally I had like for individual hosts do this, for whatever do that, and then I saw that you created this other document, and I feel like rather than directing them to one thing or the other, like directing them to learn more where they can learn all of it is probably better than trying
Yeah,
to suggest something up front.
I agree.
Because we
Yeah,
don't know,
and then it's easy to change too
right?
later. Yeah. It's easy to
Yeah.
change here in the UI as well. So if people get confused, then we can make quick improvements. But that makes sense. Another reaction I had was like all the purple in the text. I'm like, I'm not sure. Like it's my attention's getting drawn to a lot of different things. I like lighting up stuff because it's helpful. There's also
But
considerations for like that we have to take into account for like what happens if we end up deleting bear because this activity like item will persist forever in history. But let's say like you delete
oh right, then
bear at some point, like that at that point, we probably need to fall back to some non-lit up state or something like that.
so would we
we're
actually oh, sorry, go ahead, Ian.
so if I recall correctly, well, so since this will actually be running off of the activity entry its entirety, it doesn't actually have to call back to an install or anything like that. Um, the the front end, unless it's making additional calls in the background to pull a title and getting a 404 and that sort of thing, front end is not going to know whether these host IDs or title IDs are valid.
Got it.
Um, Worst case, somebody clicks it, they get a 404. Like that feels like no harm, no foul.
Yeah, that's a bad experience. I think we bold them then if we don't want to make. I think that's a good enough iteration.
Wait,
Not
so
light them up.
we don't want to link, so we're not going to link these anymore.
Yeah, I think if I'm understanding Ian correctly, it's like we could put in some extra effort to still check if those are still valid, meaning like if you haven't deleted Bear or if you haven't deleted Noah Tellerman's MacBook Pro, but
So
I think for sake of simplicity, like we could come back and we've done that all over the activity feed. Like at some point, we might want to come back and light things up, but I think we can push that. The Apple Business Manager one, sorry, that one
Oh
can
yeah,
stay.
sorry, yep.
Yeah.
They went a little too far on that one.
so given so I think a lot of our focus yesterday was how do we allow an admin to easily recover from this workflow or in this workflow where like given that we are not shipping a remediation that is automatically happening
Yeah.
and given that what we're telling somebody to do is reinstall the app
Uh-huh.
on the host here and like the reason that somebody's looking at this is primarily not for historical purposes, is like, hey, it's telling me a thing failed.
Right.
If we're not lighting this up, then that means we're like, screw you, go to the host page, which we're not going to link to, search for
Well,
the
you're already on the host page in
you
this
uh
scenario.
for this could also show up in the global app, in the global
Fair enough.
activity log.
Yeah.
And like that's more likely the place that somebody's going to see this.
Do we show these activities on the global feed already
We
today?
certainly show software installs and failed installs because that screenshot that I pulled was from the global activity feed on dog food.
But we do show them even for
For failed, yeah.
like the mass like policy
Yep.
automation. We do. Okay. Then it makes sense to surface them in both places. But Ian, you see how all over we're following the same pattern. I think it's okay. Like we want to get something in quickly. Like the core problem we're trying to solve here is we don't even tell you something went wrong. I think we can come back around to fixing it. Like, but the core thing we want to solve is like, hey, this didn't work. And there's a relatively easy way to fix it that we can iterate on later. So that's the call we're making now, is to say, hey, let's flag it and like let's get this in as soon as we can, and then we can follow up later with a nice remediation. I don't think it's a screw you. It's a little bit harder, but I think, yeah, let's go with this for now. And then we can move on to some other stuff.
Okay, so then the other thing that I did was I updated the error messages to kind of reflect the copy that we have and the treatments that we have going on here, where it says installation failed because X, it's resolve, do Y.
Let's see, copy feedback. I think we use like couldn't install, like we typically do like couldn't add, couldn't install, like for sake of
Yeah, I don't know, like the way it's written
consistency.
right now. Yeah, that's true. It's just the way it's written now feels very choppy to me. Like right now, this is how it reads, right? Couldn't install, no available licenses. It's not very friendly or human sounding.
Okay.
So I took a stab at making it a little more like readable and for flow. I mean, if you want, we can go back to this, but
No, I like that, the way you're thinking. I think there's somewhere we could meet in the middle with consistency and making it better. Let's see. Do you mind going back to your couldn't install?
same page so we can actually see it more easily.
How about, I wonder, do you mind trying like couldn't install because MDM is turned off? I think what we were going for with the top was like as few words as possible. Like there's a balance between, I see what you're saying, sounding robotic and being verbose. Yeah, I like that. I do like because in there. I think that it makes it more friendly. Like, here's why. And then do we need the double learn more in the second one? Or sorry, the double link. Let's see, head to Apple Business Manager and try again.
Like learn more as to how you like reinstall and stuff like that.
Yeah. Just I think like having two options is it feels a little bit confusing. Like, where should I go? Head to Apple Business Manager. I mean, here at this point, as a user, like, what are you doing? You've gotten to the install button, right? Like, this is popping up when you're hitting actions install.
Mm-hmm.
Do they need to learn more? Like, they've already gotten to that step in the
There's this
path.
True. I guess this is true. We could lose it in both places. Because you're right, because they know what they're doing already.
Yeah, like they've already either intuited or know where the install button is, or they've read the guide.
Hmm.
Yeah. Could install. Cool.
Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense.
All right. So I will update these link things and then I'll move this into user story review so we can look at it later this week for that.
Sounds good.
Next one. Okay. So this is hide automatically created fleet created policies in policies list. So this is this
Oh yeah,
one.
based on some feedback from Alan.
Yep. So I want to hide this in the policies list so I won't be confused by policies I didn't create. Also the fact that it's like the words aren't matching what I would expect. So the Figma is pretty simple. It's just like I just basically have a before and after, which is like, oops, which is like, here's the one, here's the fleet created one.
Hmm
And we
hmm
move it. So the main question here is,
Yeah.
sorry, go ahead.
No, go for it. I think
Uh,
I have a similar question as my guess.
Well, the main
But go.
question is like, in order to do this, there's going to have to be some more API changes to attach the creator to the policy in order to hide it. So I have a,
Or we'll have to have some notion of like this, not necessarily the creator, but
yeah,
like this one's tied to software, if that makes sense. But even before we get into the API, now I'm looking at this change and I'm like, I don't know, I don't think we would ship it up by itself. Because like then we're taking away the ability for someone to edit the policy if they wanted to,
mhm.
which is
I thought you
like
couldn't edit, I thought you couldn't edit the fleet created policies.
You
you
can.
can.
Oh, you can. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, and I think one of the things that Alan was mentioning was that the fleet created policies are a little bit distracting because the policy naming conventions that we have that we auto generate may be different from otherwise, and then that has admins looking at them and they shouldn't be looking at them or whatever.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I know you also filed that story, Eugene. I don't know if it's in the current sprint about showing the policies and like making the targets more visible on the software title
Mhm.
details page. Like I think we would have to pair this change
Oh, with
with a
that one.
similar change. Like because we still this is like one of Fleet's differentiators is like unlike other MDMs, we're not like a black box. Like you can change the trigger if you really want to. But in a lot of cases, to Alan's point, like for Chrome, for all the Fleet maintained apps, at least, I trust that Fleet should be creating the right policy. I don't need to tweak it. But even still, like we should reveal it if it's like our transparency, which is core to our brand too.
Right.
So yeah, I think somehow maybe we just squish the stories together.
Well, I'll keep them
Yeah.
separate I'll link between the two, but I'll keep them separate just so like we don't overly burden one ticket. With the understanding.
Yeah. But I think we wouldn't ship like we want to keep the stories like if it they should be like one unit that if they shipped by themselves, they would add value. I would argue that just if we just shipped hiding policies, like it would actually not add any value.
Sorry.
So like
Well,
we would want we do want like the story to be a unit of something that's adding value. So I mean, up to you on how to tweak it, but that's why I'm proposing squishing them together or getting rid of this one in favor of the other one, like maybe as part of revealing it on the software title page, we're removing it in the policies list. Um, I think we
Okay.
could ship the other one first. That would kind of be weird too if it showed up in two places. I don't think we want to do that.
where's the can you hop over to the other story?
Yeah, the other story would be awesome. Yeah, install. Oh, a second. That would be this one.
So this would be pulling. So currently we have, when we have automation on software, that's one click away from the software details page. Like if we look at a
Oh,
piece of software that's already been automated, like it's there already.
yeah, you know what? Yeah, I could be misremembering. I could be wrong.
Because I think the 25501, the intent was to bring that up a level so that you didn't have to click in.
You're right. I think what I was picturing, and I think I'm wrong, if we got rid of the policy in the policy page, there'd be no way to get to that policy, but I'm wrong, right? Because you can go
Yeah,
through this
you can hop in
direction.
here
Okay.
and it would still show up in the, I would assume it would still show up in the automations modal, right?
This one? Oh, this
Yeah,
one?
that's a good
Yeah,
point
so
too.
if we hop over to the automations model or modal for under policies
Molecules.
and manage automations, install software, it would still show up here.
Well, I don't know. That's a good point. I didn't think about that either.
So like we're basically changing from showing it three places to showing it two, which allows 25501 to go in whenever we feel like it. Uh,
Right. But
and
yeah, I see what you're saying. I was wrong. But I want to like, or sorry, continue before we go back. Sorry to interrupt.
and from an API backward compatibility perspective, the way we need to do this is you add a filter to the policies list API endpoint, and then the front end uses that filter. Otherwise, we're hiding stuff, we're breaking BC.
Yeah. Yeah, we'd have some flag where it's like, I don't know, is tied to software or something consistent. Um, but Eugene, that this brings up like Ian brings up a good point, which is like, okay, we hide it from the list and then we show it here. I don't know. It feel like there's some things to think through. It's a little weird. Do we need to show it here? Like I think there's some like paths, some journeys to think through for sure.
I'll try to say this as quickly as I can because I don't want to derail the conversation too much, but I don't think the root of the problem is that I'm seeing policies that I don't want to see. I think the root of the problem is I want to automatically install software. And in order to do that, the way that we've implemented it is that we're adding additional policies. And I don't care about those policies. All I care about is that the software is automatically be installed. But you're cluttering my policies with all of these additional policies that I'm not going to edit or mess with. And people are going to see them on the My Device page. So I just wanted to point that out. Like,
Well, the My
the
Device page
idea,
is a separate. I think the first point you made is a really good one, which is like, I think if I'm understanding what you're saying, I'm not going to come in here as an IT admin. Like I've chosen automatic install, like it should get automatically installed. And then the second point you're bringing up is, should we show it on the My Device and host details page as well? And that's another good question. And you were about to say what you think we should do. So go for
no,
it.
I'm just saying like this is an artifact of the way that we've chosen to implement this, meaning the only trigger that we have right now to automatically install software is a policy. Like, if we would look into an alternative for like how we're going to trigger automatic software installs, this issue goes away completely.
Yeah,
So it was just something that, I understand that we used policies as the trigger because it was existing functionality and we figured we could leverage it for this automatic install option. But I just want to point out, like, those choices that we make have consequences. And so now we're trying to remediate the consequence instead of addressing the initial implementation.
I see what you're saying. The initial implementation we decided to do and stick with too. Like we're going to continue to build on top of policies because that is the rule engine that we built in Fleet. So I see what you're saying. The plan was always, and we've been kind of slow to get to it, was always to hide these policies. We just have taken a very piecemeal approach to doing it. I don't think we're going to stray. I could be wrong, but I don't think we're going to stray from policies being the trigger. Like that's going to remain the core foundation for automations. I get what you're saying though about reconsidering, but
Good.
we're going to stick with policies.
I guess
As the
one
trigger.
question on that, like when is automatic software install for for iOS and iPad OS? Where is that on the roadmap?
We haven't started thinking about it,
Okay.
really. It could be like within the next like 180 days, something like that. Not this quarter.
Okay. The
Yeah.
reason being that one of the things with a policy primitive is a policy is it boils down to the result of an OS query. And for mobile platforms, we're not like porting OS query to mobile platforms is not in scope. So at that point, we will have to either revise policies to not be based on the query.
Yeah.
It's not 100% of the time.
Yeah. At some
Or
point, we're going to have new kinds of policies. Like I think we'll have like a vulnerability type policy where you check like, does the host have this vulnerability or not? We'll have to build on top of that. We'll have to expand that policy's primitive in some way. And maybe we do find a way to build an application that you can run on iOS and iPadOS that behaves like OS query, but that's a little bit further down the road, I think. The base will always be policies for the trigger.
Okay, we're over at the moment, but I just have one question, generally, I guess. So back to the ticket at hand, which is this hiding, and the fact that we're gonna have to like key the policy to something. Like you mentioned this would be an API change, but it wouldn't be like a REST API change on the front end that we would surface to people. So how do we process-wise handle that?
You would still propose it in the same way. Like we'll need some I'm happy to help with this, but I would also reach out to Rachel because I'll be out this week. It's the same process. Like you'll propose like some flag to the get policies API and then some filter to it. And the way to kind of to think about it or approach it, Eugene, is like start with the UI first. Like I wrote down a couple more questions, but like what pages are we going to hide the policies on? And then like what API endpoints power those pages? Like each of those API endpoints will need this flag that you'll approach. Like I see what you're saying. There's no new things in the UI, but the process and the way to think about it is the same. Like we're taking things away. So like for that change, what will the API need in that sense?
Right. I'm not sure where to find those APIs, but I guess I'll ask Rachel.
Yeah, I would reach out to Rachel Shaw.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right.
But yeah, I dropped a couple to-dos in there for you, Eugene. Questions that came up based on Janice and Ian's thoughts.
I have one more thought about hiding policies in the UI. Couldn't you have like a toggle that would be like off by default, but you could toggle it on to show fleet created policies? That way, if somebody still needs to access them in the UI, there's a way to see them.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think up to Eugene. What we arrived at is I was wrong about there's no way to see them. That you can go to the software title page. So I want to make sure that we
You can see
we
them, but you
realize
can't
that
edit them from there. I'm
you
saying like
can
if for some reason,
you click on them and they'll take you directly to the title page, if that makes sense. Like you'll just get hot linked into the edit policy
Right from where?
page.
That covers editing the query and that sort of thing. That doesn't cover setting automations. So if we hid fleet created policies from the install software automation, there would be no way to get at that particular piece of configuration.
Yeah. And I don't think there needs to be from the perspective of someone saying, hey, Fleet automatically install this piece of software. But that's why I wrote it down, Eugene, like worth thinking through whether they need to be able to do that action. I gotta hop, y'all, but yeah, up to you, Eugene.
All right,
See you.
thanks. So, I don't know. I feel like I have a lot of thoughts about this policies and elevation stuff, which I'm sure Janice can predict my thoughts on, but based on conversations we've already had.
I was having a little side chat with Ian, but it was interesting. Inevitably, we're going to be expanding the definition of policies, right? To account for our new use cases, right? Policies today are a result of an OS query, and that's not going to be the case in the future. And they're also run on a certain schedule, and that's not going to be flexible enough, I think, for patching use cases either. So, yeah, more discussions to come on that.
Yeah, I guess I'll play around with this fleet, like with the host details and the manage automations bubble. But it sounds like from Ian's perspective, we do not want to hide it from here or here.
So
Can we filter it?
my perspective is that from so we got three places. We have software details. Sorry, we have like five places. We have software details. We have the actual policies list. We have automations. We have the My Device page, and we have the host policies list. In the case of the My Device page, yeah, fair enough to have a default and just set it and not worry about it. In the case of
And what do you mean by
software,
set? Okay, what does that mean? Just set an order. So you'd
not
say
provide end users the option to show the under the hood stuff.
right.
But that is specifically for My Device.
Right.
For hosts, for the policy list page and for policy automations, allowing us to see when a policy is, something under the hood. Given that some of this stuff is still rather rough, and I don't think fleet maintained apps is the exception to this, being able to get at that stuff via the UI is helpful. So having a show hide toggle there, like I'm of the opinion similar to Janice, if she didn't bring it up, I would have brought it up, that having that is a good thing.
Mhm.
For the actual software title details, we just show it 100% of the time. Because we need to have that link in to like, hey, this is a thing that exists. Because if we don't, then there is not a way to well, I guess we can swap automatic to manual for install for software, but if you have multiple policy, well, I guess that's the way to get your software out of a point where it can't be deleted to a point where it can, because um, we require removing any policy automations for a piece of software before you can remove that software. And that was a design decision we could implement. We could change that implementation where it just auto deletes, but yeah,
So you have to manually delete the automation before you can delete the software.
that's correct.
Okay.
Or you have to unassociate, well, like
Yeah.
remove the software from that policy before you can.
Yeah. So when I say I delete the automation, that is what I mean.
Okay. So I will do a little more digging around and make some updates to this. I'm gonna ask Rachel Shaw about the API stuff. Unless you can actually tell me where the API stuff is. Do you guys know where the API get things live?
So for this policies list endpoint is actually in the public REST API.
Oh, it is.
And the trigger for um, showing or hiding, basically, we don't have a concept of this API endpoint has these options, but some of the options are only in contributor API docs. If the API endpoint is public, then the various options on that API endpoint are also public. My guess is that the my device policies list might be in contributor docs rather than public. I'm not 100% on that though.
Okay. I'll ask Rachel.
Yep.
So if this is in the public API docs, then the things that I was talking about would apply, right? We would actually show the
Yes.
okay.
And the rule of thumb on backward breaking changes is if it's in the contributor API, then joke's on you if you use that for automations. We don't guarantee BC or forward compat on that API. However, unless we mark something as experimental, which policy endpoints are not, to my knowledge, we hold ourselves to ensuring backward compatibility on anything in the public API. Which
Okay.
means that like the default needs for that policy endpoint needs to continue being show stuff even when it's fleet internal.
Okay. All right. We're like 12 minutes over. Thank you very much for your time.